So I'm very delighted to be joined this evening by Richard Cox and Tim Soers, who are two of the main collaborative creative leads on Die Walküre Act I concert performance, which is coming to St Mary of Charity in Faversham. That's on the 12th of April at 4 p.m. Good evening, gentlemen, and thank you very much for taking the time to speak to me about this wonderful, if slightly epic project. Um, so, Richard, you are the main sort of musical brain behind the project, and Tim, you're the main musical voice, essentially, inside the project. And given that Wagner was writing for massed orchestras, I think it's something like 16 violins and a bunch of French horns, and there's all sorts of offstage instruments. I think there's a car horn in there. There's something quite elaborate at some point that's supposed to be sounded from elsewhere. Just explain how you've managed to reduce it down to the forces we'll enjoy on the 12th of April.
Oh, it took several iterations. I started off more or less you writing down somewhere on the pianos every single note that Wagner wrote, but quickly we found obviously that that just wasn't actually it wasn't pianistic, it wasn't very musical to be quite honest. But yeah, most of it is there. We couldn't have done it on a single piano because you just need different textures on top of each other quite a lot of the time. And having the two pianos really, a lot of the time, it has a fairly similar musical effect, we think, anyway. And of course, adding the cello as we're doing for this performance gives us an extra dimension. There's a lot of solo cello work in the opening act of Die Walküre, so it's very nice to have that.
Lovely. And so um yes, and are there plans to sort of rest the arrangement at this stage, or is this going to be like a developing project again? Would there be like if you could wish for one thing that you could add in on top of this, what might that
Oh,
be?
I'd like to have a trumpet because that's the next thing.
Okay. And I beg your pardon, it wasn't a car horn, but a cow horn and a thunder machine. So if you just abandon those, or are they from different acts maybe?
I don't think the Thunder Machine is in Act One. No, no.
Oh, okay.
Even
Okay.
though there's a storm, I don't think it's in there. No.
Right. And then, so Tim, for you, as one of our main protagonists who the audience will see on stage, is it entirely accurate to say that is there ensemble singing, which is kind of it's a development for Wagner in the opera in total, but in Act One, is how much sort of ensemble is there, and how much is it you different protagonists kind of laying out your musical
Um,
stage?
there, there is one beat of one bar of four where myself and Siegmund and Sieglinde sing a D for one bar, for one note in one bar. That is the only time the voices overlap at all in the whole of the act. In the whole of
Right.
hour and 10, hour and 15 minutes, we don't sing together at all. Now, that's Wagner. I think it was something, and if I stray from the path of righteousness here, forgive me, but it was something to do with Wagner hating Italian opera. And it was Italian opera where they did all these ensembles, and he thought, oh, no, we're not going to have any of
Oh,
that.
okay.
And therefore, this is going to be pure. I mean, he does do ensembles. He does ensembles in Act Three of Valkyrie with the Valkyries because,
That's
well,
right.
that
But I
makes
think
sense.
that's quite a step away for him, or that's a step forward, or however you'd want to describe it for him.
Yes, but also in Götterdämmerung, he has vassals, so of Gunther's vassals, which are a group of men who are doing, but they tend to be doing a group job together, and so they'll sing together, obviously in those quite small, relatively focused bits. But most of the ring is individual voices expounding their passion, their love, their hate, their all the things that Wagner brings to his storytelling,
Mm.
um, and them doing it on their own and with others or and other listening.
And it's going to be quite, I mean, it is going to be all those things you described in terms of the emotionality of the event, because
For
it
sure,
is
sure.
quite a it's quite a tour de force in terms of like emotionality, in terms of all of those different experiences.
Well, I mean, I
I
think
do. Sorry, Tim.
the great thing about Act One of Valkyrie, unusually compared to any other single act in the ring and other single acts that we've looked elsewhere, it is a separate story. It has a beginning, a middle, and an
Mm,
end in the actual act. It's about how Siegfried gets made, if you like, and that's from Sieglinde and Siegmund falling in love, as they
mm,
do in the story that we're presenting Sunday week. So yes, it's unusual. No other act has that particular feature, and of course,
mm,
it means it's why it's a wonderful opportunity to do it as as you rightly point out, the number of instruments in the orchestra is significant, and the scale of the production you tend to get with Wagner is it's epic music as well as epic productions. So
mm.
it's very difficult to see how that could be done other than the way that we've approached it on a smaller scale, so that ordinary audiences can come along and see it and not have to travel to Bayreuth or the Royal Opera House
That's right.
and spend hundreds of pounds and a lot of time.
I love the way you're selling this. There'll be a link at the end, which is yeah, £15 in advance and £20 on the door. So yes, so get your tickets while they're hot. Richard, you were going to come in on that point maybe as well.
I've forgotten what I was going to say now, but I'd like to add that for me, it's the most romantic part of the entire ring.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm,
And another nice thing about it also is because it's quite early on. When you're listening to the singers and you hear these themes that Wagner uses to depict characters and events, you're hearing them most of the time for the first time. So you're hearing when there's a sword buried in a tree, for example, and there's a theme that keeps going back. And the first time you hear it, you don't hear it in the earlier opera because, of course, it's not relevant there. It's
mm.
relevant now. Boy, is it relevant. And so you hear it for the first time. And so you're introduced to the themes, I think, in the best way to be introduced to them, because you're following the what the characters are saying and they're telling the story, and then you hear the theme, and the theme becomes associated in your mind with that particular thing.
Mm.
It's a great way to get ready for the if for the rest of the ring if you're going to carry on.
Yes, well, that leitmotif idea. Yes, absolutely. And I suppose as both pianists, and it'll be played on two two Blutner grand pianos, which are very kind of close in tonal world to each other. So actually, yes, the timbre of the cow horn and the thunder machine might be a thing, but harmonically, it's quite a staggering piece of work. I mean, I think and I suppose that's tied in with the leitmotif stuff to an extent, is it? And you'll have studied this much more. But harmonically, would you agree that there's really quite a journey there to be explored?
Oh yes, yes. I mean, the famous thing about Wagner is that he doesn't like what a thing called a perfect cadence, which is a sequence of two harmonies which kind of finish things off. And although in other operas he takes this to an extreme, there are very, very few perfect cadences in Act One. There are a few, but very, very few indeed. Like I mean, less than six, for example.
Right.
So
Okay.
harmonically speaking, he's going in the direction that he later did to an extreme, and that does make it harmonically very very interesting, very complex.
And does that maybe so certainly when I've been to and I've not been to lots and lots of Wagner, but I've been to I'm hoping to tick off more as time goes by. There is a sense of you have to sort of adjust your inner clock to move at the pace he's moving and once you've achieved that then you experience the swells and the really the great overwhelm at some points does the harmony is that one of the main carriers of that would you say that
Oh,
might
definitely.
okay yeah
Oh yeah, yeah,
yeah
yes. It's you're absolutely right to say as an audience member, you do have to be prepared to go with Wagner's timescale because he never says anything in a minute that could be said in 15. So, but it's great.
oh
And
absolutely
it's so wonderfully exciting by turns. And sometimes, even within the space of a single page on the score, you have somebody being fearful and then being overwhelmed and then being tremendously excited and trying to convey that to somebody else and so on. So, and you have all that and you've got an hour and 10 minutes of that.
And I love the way you've set up my other marketing ploy, which is a way to sort of condition yourself for that mindset is, of course, to go to the bar before the performance and then perhaps
Indeed.
visit the bar afterwards as well. Lovely. Okay, and I suppose one other so the fact that because Wagner wouldn't necessarily approve of this project, would he? Because he got quite grumpy about um who's that? That's somebody. He got quite grumpy about uh the opera being done outside of the cycle. Is that right? So I think he wanted to wait until the whole thing was complete, and then his patron said, "No, no, I've paid for these two. I'd quite like them. Thank you very much." Um,
Okay, right.
so, but I think maybe does that come back to your point, Tim, that it's a wonderfully accessible project. It really is a great way to start to experience Wagner if you haven't already.
And I think that's the main point. If to go to any of the other one, perhaps not Das Rheingold, but any of the other three, which are 5.5 hours, 6 hours long in total,
Mm.
these are they're difficult. I mean, they're not for the faint-hearted, and particularly if you don't know the music well that you're going to be going to see and hear. So the great thing about this particularly is this little snapshot is that it gives you a window, it gives you a way into enjoying the music, understanding how the music delivers on the emotional scale that it does, and yet it's an hour and 10 minutes,
Mm.
and there's a story that starts and develops and finishes, so it's satisfying from a storytelling standpoint as well as musically. So that's the great thing, and we did do this before. This is a development of it, but we did do a production of this a couple of years ago in West London, and that's the one thing we found. And quite a lot of people came who were not opera goers and were not Wagner,
Mm.
fans, and they thoroughly enjoyed it.
Mm.
And as I say, I think that's the success of it is the entry into that world,
Mm.
in an accessible kind of a way. One of
Yeah.
the important things we have is we have the surtitles. So although we're singing in German, it'll be big and clear exactly what we're singing about
What's
and
happening?
what we're saying and how the action is developing.
And you've both been quite clear, and I suppose adamant is too strong a word probably, but it's very clearly a concert performance. And
Certainly.
why is that? What's the value of that, would you say?
Well, it does strip it away. I mean, I think if you want to do a proper performance of Valkyrie, or even of the first act, you've got quite some expense to deliver, both from a costume, lighting, production standpoint, and the musical production. So I think stripping all that away from it leaves you with the great music and the
Yeah.
great storytelling, right?
Mm.
And that's what we're focusing on delivering.
Mm.
And yes, we'll have a score in front of us. We won't be referring to it all the time, but we will have a score in front of us.
Yeah.
And there'll be the three guys playing behind. It's smaller in forces, but I think that doesn't mean it lacks intensity. It certainly doesn't do that.
No, no, I think I would have actually in some ways. It's like when you go to see semi-staged operas that in the proms, they'll lift the Glyndebourne Opera into the Albert Hall. And I've seen many productions that I think have been really intense because you're just presented with the music much more. And yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I would
Well,
agree.
I'm really excited that the ensemble is coming down to perform for us. That's the 12th of April, 4 p.m. I'm saying it. I've heard both of you say it now, and I'm saying it in completely the wrong way. But I'm going to go for the Valkyrie Act I, a concert performance at St Mary's Charity, 12th of April at 4 p.m. And we very, very much look forward to seeing everybody down there. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Very
Our
good.
pleasure.
Bye bye.